What's on, minifans? I'm back with another vehicle, and this is probably the last one. This time I am making a crane to go with my hauler and lifter that I made previously. Anyway, if you like anything in the video, feel free to like, subscribe, and ring that notification bell to stay up to date with my content. I have some affiliate links down in my description box, so Amazon ones for my most used items, and then a couple of hobby stores, so one for US and one for UK/Europe, and you get discounted hobby supplies, including miniatures. Alrighty, enough of this, let's get on to crafting. I start off by making a little template on some cardstock, and I don't have exact measurements. This is why I do it on cardstock, because this way I can just do it once and then just trace it onto chipboard, and then both sides will be the same. So this is for the cabin. So I've traced this template out onto chipboard, done the front and back panels as well, and then I just glue it all together using hot glue initially, but I do reinforce this with super glue, but I leave the back off for in a minute. I've prepped a bit of that mesh, the metal mesh I've used before for the windscreen. I go ahead, get this into place with a barbecue skewer, and then super glue it in. And then I do two little, again with the barbecue skewers, bits on the top and bottom of the windscreen on the front of the cabin. Paint the inside black so I won't be able to get to it later, and then glue the back piece on. I wanted to record one bit of the filling just to show you what I do, but I do this throughout the build and I just don't record it. So I've just got some filler and I just fill those gaps. You'll see I've got a couple of sculpting tools on the screen. Don't use those. I just use the glove on my hand, you know, and get it pretty smooth, and then I give it a sand afterwards and it's fine. The cab is pretty much done now, so I move on to the main body now. Honestly, the cab, I kind of messed up a little bit. I made it a bit taller than expected. It's about 10 centimeters tall. And then I didn't want to do it again, so I just kind of went with this. And the whole vehicle turned out a lot bigger than expected, but I think it's fine. It looks decent with the other two I've done. So, yeah, you can see I'm just making a box from chipboard. It's 8 centimeters wide, around 12 centimeters long, and 4 centimeters high. So I've just done this, as I say, with chipboard, super glued together, and then I've done some marks on the top. So the edges are 1.5 centimeters, and then one side is 2 centimeters, and I just cut out some granny grating and glue that on there just for a bit of detail on top. And I want the next part slightly off center because I think it looks kind of cool. I apologise, a few parts of this video my camera goes slightly out of focus and I didn't notice, but I think you get the general gist of what I'm doing all the time. It's only a few bits where it gets a bit funky. But what I've got here, I have this water fountain for my cat, and you have these filters in it, and the plastic part of the filter is pretty cool. So I've got one of those, I've cut it in half, or thereabouts. I'm using this on the back of that main section we've just made, and I've padded it out with some chipboard and then a bit of granny grating as detailing, sort of showing through the filter. So this is all just super glued together. To finish off the back, I want some cabling coming off that vent thing we've just made. So initially I glue on a couple of bits of straw onto the side of 2 different diameters. Then I have some old cables, and I glue those in and then bend them round and drape them under the bottom. And I actually add something on the end, is like the end of a cable, but you can't see that anyway, so I didn't really need to do that. But yeah, I just glue it all with super glue, and I use a bit of baking soda to make that bond a bit stronger. And we're up onto the top level now, and I just make another chipboard box. I think this was about 4x4, not quite as long because that's to fit in where that granny grating is. So yeah, I just make it and glue it together with super glue. Moving on to some basic details now. I'm using one of the greeblies that I made before. I cast it in resin. So this goes on one side, and then the other side of this top box and the back, I've just done 3 squares of chipboard. So these get glued on. I sanded the edges slightly with a sanding stick, so it's kind of beveled a little bit. And then in between the 2 chipboard squares I've glued onto one side of that top box, I do 2 bent cables. onto the tracks now. I do 4 sections of track for this one, because I think it looks kind of cool. And it's the same principle as my previous cargo lifter. So I've done triangular, and I've got the same thing. I've cast in resin again, but this time those big sort of wheels are 1.4 centimeters high. I wanted the tracks to be a bit wider, because this thing is massive. But then the little smaller wheels I have are only 1 centimeter. So to bolster those, I've just used a couple of bits of chipboard I glue underneath. You can't see this anyway, so it's all good. So I go ahead and glue these all together using super glue. Onto the actual tracks. I hate doing this. It is a hassle to get it all perfectly straight. Bit messy, but yeah. Anyway, I decided this time to save myself some trouble later. Paint all the insides black, because it's really hard to get to. Even with an airbrush, it's tough. So anyway, yeah, I've painted it all black, and then I just glue the tracks on, which just corrugated paper with super glue. This time I cut the corrugated paper with scissors. Previously I've used the sharpest knife I have, but sometimes it does tear, so I do find it's better with the scissors. Onto the ladders. I only actually film making one of these, but I do 3 in the end, 1 for each level. But I'm just using granny grating. It's the same as my cargo lifter that I made previously. I'm just using granny grating and then cutting out some sections so the rungs are a bit further apart. But this time I decide to reinforce the ladders by using chipboard rectangles super glued to the sides, and then sort of bend the top and bottom over and glue those on, because it's not that strong, even coated in super glue. So this makes them a lot sturdier, and then these just get glued into place. Next up, I do some railings to go around the bottom section of this monster vehicle. And you can see what I've done. I've just made the shape with chipboard, and then I glue in a couple of cocktail sticks for each part. Initially, as I was going to attach these, I realised that's not going to be strong enough. So what I do is I add some little rectangles of chipboard just under where the railings will sit. So it just provides a bit more stability and strength to the railing join. It's that time. It's riveting time. I do go a little crazy with this build. There are a lot of rivets. Not sure exactly how many. I didn't count, but just take my word for it. There's lots. I only filmed this little bit though. So if you've never seen one of my videos, this is what I do. So the rivets are fingernail beads, and you just get them ready. You get some super glue on something it won't soak into, bit of baking paper, or in this case I'm using this whiteboard sheet. Cocktail stick, bit of blue tack on the end, pick up a rivet, whack it in super glue, whack it into place. Boom, repeat many, 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 many times. I know I do make a bit of a big deal about the rivets, but honestly it doesn't bother me doing them. Just whack on something in the background to listen to, and just go for it. In some ways it's almost calming. Maybe not sure. But yeah, just I know a lot of people have been giving me ideas on other ways to do it. I don't think I'm going to change. I think I'm always going to do it this way. We're on to assembling the main body now. I initially start with the tracks, and what I've done on the inside sort of triangular panel of the tracks, I've done a line at the bottom 5mm up, so I use this as a guide. So these get glued onto the sides using copious amounts of super glue, and then I go ahead and glue the top section on, and then the whole front cabin as well. Onto the exhaust pipe. I wanted this to be a bit of a beast, but just a singular one rather than the double one I did for my lifter previously. So I've started off with a load of sections of chipboard. They're 2 centimeters by 1.5 centimeter, and I do like 2 to make one layer, and then a single between, and then 2, and repeat. So the double layer, I snip off a corner just using clippers, and then use that as a guide so the others are all the same. So I just slap it down on top and then cut the next one. Rinse and repeat. And then for the single layers in between those double layers, I cut out a square, just making it slightly bigger than the corner I've lopped off previously. And then I just glue these together, and I just use Mod Podge, so I'm sealing as I go. I change how I do the actual exhaust pipes, because with the cargo lifter I made, I used straw. It was really hard to get the holes drilled like perfectly central. So this tube I'm using is plastic, and it's the inner tube from a roll of cat litter bags, but it's perfect. It's got these ridges so you can keep perfectly in line. So I just drill 3 holes with a pin vise, sand it a little bit with a needle file, and then saw off the bottom just using a hobby saw. And then I've got another bit of straw I stick in, and this all gets super glued together. Then I'm back to the body of the exhaust system, and it's all dried now, so I just cover it in filler and then give it a sand afterwards. I did miss a bit of footage here, so I didn't film making the hatch, but basically it's like one layer of one of those hair curler things, the plastic things, and I've just snipped that off with wire cutters and sanded it a bit, and then I've cut a circle of cardstock which gets glued on top, riveted all around the outside, and then the handle is just a bit of granny grating, cut to size and glued on. So this gets glued onto the top of the cab. Then for the hinge, what I've done is I've got some old speaker cable. I've poked out the cable, and I'm just using the casing. And I've kind of cut it in half, so I've got these, half circles. And then I glue on a bit of cocktail stick. One of those at either end, so these just all get super glued on, and then a bit of card bent around the cocktail stick to join that to the hatch. Off camera, I have glued a square of chipboard just to block where that railing ends, because there's nothing there. And then I just glue the exhaust pipe on, so I do the base first, get it into place, whack a load of super glue around it, and then the exhaust pipe on top. At this point, looking at the sort of bottom section of this vehicle, I realised I wanted a bit more detail. So I figured I could put some panels on like the main body in between where the tracks are. And then I thought one of those could have a little door on it. So I've just cut this rectangular chipboard and then cut out a smaller rectangle from the inside of that one. Put on another granny grating handle. Cut the corners off and put some cocktail sticks as, you know, a little hingy bit. And then obviously I cover these in rivets and then I just glue these into place. So I did that hatch one on one side, then the other side just a square of chipboard. So the main body is now done. So we're actually onto the crane. So you can see the shapes I've made here. Again, I just made a template out of card and then traced that out onto chipboard, cut out multiple panels, and then I glue these together. And again, I just use Mod Podge, sealing as I go. So that's the start of the body of the crane arm. And now we're actually on to the arm itself. So for this to join to the body, I'm using a bit of that kid's pipe, which I've sawn off and sanded down. And then I start making the arm. So it's 10 centimeters long, and where it joins to that tube, it's I think about 1.5 centimeters, but then it tapers down to a centimeter at the end. So this is all chipboard, glued together with super glue, reinforced with baking soda. The ends of those chipboard pieces we've just made, which will go around the tube, I traced the tube onto the end of them and then cut that bit out so it sits as flush as I can get it. Chipboard is quite hard to cut in a decent circle. Then for a little bit of detail on this arm, I've done 3mm strips of cardstock. These get glued at the top and bottom of the sides, and I've done these marks 2 centimeters along. So obviously that's where rivets go. So that's what I do next. And then I go ahead and glue this onto that bit of pipe. Then for a little bit of detail on the tube itself, I glued 2 strips of the remaining 3mm cardstock around the tube. Now we're on to like the upper arm, the extending bit. So I've got some strips of chipboard. Again, they're 10 centimeters. The sort of base piece is 6mm wide, and then the side pieces are 5mm wide. So these just get glued together with super glue. Then I wanted something to hold the chain in place. So again, I've got some of the inner roll thing from the cat litter bags. I've cut some sections of that. They're about 1 centimeter long. Cut them in half, so I've got a semicircle. I do a couple of these glued onto like the base of the arm, and then one section right at the end, and then another half section of straw on the very end. What I'm building here is like the mounting point on the bottom arm for a pneumatic piston. So I've done a couple of rectangles of chipboard with the corner snipped off, loads of rivets on those, and then I've got a small section again of that inner tube, and I glue this in between. We're assembling the main body of the arm now. So I've made a couple of extra rectangles of chipboard to give it a bit more stability. So for the back section, that rectangle is 2.6 centimeters wide. So I glue that together with super glue. And then I've got, I think it was from a water filtering system, these little joining pieces, the white bits I'm using here. So I've got those glued together with some straw down the middle to act as an axle. And I glue some 4mm chain onto this and wrap it round. And then I do the same thing with the front section. I glue the chipboard bits together and then glue the lower piece of the arm onto that where the pipe is. I then thread the chain through those two half circles we've glued onto the top of the arm. Glue like the chain drum onto the back piece and glue the back piece to the front piece of the arm body. Then off camera, I've glued the front, like the upper arm on, threaded the chain through. By the way, I've covered the chain in super glue, so it will not move. And then I'm moving on to the piston. So I've got a couple of pieces of straw to make the piston itself, different diameters, you know, so they fit inside each other. And then I've added another bit of that inner tube from the litter bags. I've glued that below where the arm joins to the body. Then the straws, kind of get them into place. Glue the little piece we made earlier onto the bottom of the arm. Glue the pipes into place. Just as a final bit of additional detail onto the main body of the vehicle, right on the top where the crane's going to go, I decided it looked a bit too plain, so I've just glued a bit of cable tie down either side and then snipped it off with clippers. After that, I glue the whole crane on top. I couldn't decide for a while what to do at the end of the chain. Initially I was going to do a hook, but then I thought that looks not cool enough. I want to grab a claw, so that's what we're making now. I'm making 3 like claws to this. So what I've done, but each claw is 2 sections, and each of these sections, what I've done is 6mm by 2cm bits of chipboard, and then I've cut one into shape, then used that as a template for the rest. So you have the claws and then the other piece to the claw. I want it to be double thickness of chipboard, so I start by gluing these together with Mod Podge. On the inside edge of those claws, I glue some thin cable tie. That in a tube from the litter bags is so useful. So this is the base of this claw. Now I did quite a bit of this off camera, but I've got a section of that and I've glued little chipboard rectangles to act as like an anchor for the claws in 3 points. Again, the little ridges on these tubes are just perfect for lining everything up. And then on the top and bottom I've done card circles, but the top one I've cut out a little rectangle because the chain feeds nicely into that and it'll, hold it. So then I go ahead and start assembling. So I'm using tacky glue here because I figured I want to be able to move it a little bit, but for it to hold in place. So again, I just go in and start assembling. Once I've got the claw perfect, how I want it, I dribble a bit of super glue to really bind it in place until that tacky glue dries. And then off camera, again, more rivets. On to painting now. I've primed everything black and base coated burnt umber. I used an airbrush, but you could easily do this with rattle cans. And then any hard to reach places, you're probably not going to see anyway. Then I have dry brush dark silver, heavy dry brush, and then a light dry brush of light silver on some bits, prominent edges. And then you'll see I've masked off some areas with masking tape. I'm going in with yellow, don't want to get any on that silver. So I start off by sponging on flesh tone, and then some of the harder to reach places I use an old small brush, just dab some of that on. Then once that's dried, I sponge on yellow straight over the top. Some of the silver is still showing through that yellow, but I want more, especially on edges and corners. So I'm just going in with a small brush, that dark silver again, and just doing sort of the scratchy bits on some of the corners to make it look like the paint's all chipped off. I am keeping this paint job fairly simple. So what I do is paint the tracks black, and then later I give them a dry brush of grey, and then I mask off on the top of the cab a line, same as the other 2 vehicles I've made, and then sponge on white. Black wash time. So I give the whole thing a dousing with my homemade black wash and then dab some off those yellow bits. This is the same black wash that I made last time. It has lasted really well. After that's dried, we're on to weathering, rust, etc. So I initially start sponging on burnt umber in various places, especially around like the outside parts of the tracks. So it's all nice and dirty. And then where this will be rust on the metal, I sponge on orange over the top. Then once all that's dried, I do some staining with brown and black inks. And that's the end of the project. Here's a few photos of the finished piece. Definitely pleased with this one. It did turn out a bit bigger than intended, but I think it looks very cool. Unfortunately, my wife did say something, and that was, it looks like a big turtle. And that has stuck with me, and it has destroyed it for me. I think it does look good. But there is one thing I would change, and that is the crane arm itself. I should have magnetized that rather than gluing it on. But I didn't have big enough magnets, and I didn't want to wait, so yeah, I glued it on. But it would have been nice to be able to turn it, and also put it in other places. I guess I could cut it off if I really want to at some point. But yeah, pleased with this one. I've realised at this point I haven't actually said a thank you, but I have a few patrons, and thank you very much. It means the world that you signed up. Anyway, that's it from me. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next video. Cheers for now.